Imagine, just for a second, being there in the middle of nowhere, with your face burnt by the sun, your clothes dirty with dust, and your bare feet tearing on the hot asphalt, trying to sell the last bananas that would barely be enough to buy a handful of rice to feed your child waiting at home hungry. Now imagine that in addition to the hunger, in addition to the pain, in addition to the humiliation of being ignored all day, you still had to hear laughter, insults, being called stinky, trash, as if you were less than a human being, as if you were worthless, as if the world had decided that you were invisible, disposable. Now breathe, because what I'm about to tell you will give you goosebumps. Just when she was about to give up on everything, just when her heart almost believed that this was just another day to forget, a luxury black car, the kind she had only seen from afar, stopped right in front of her. And when the door opened, it wasn't just a man who got out. It was destiny. It was justice. It was the beginning of the most absurd and unexpected turn of her life. Because what that man, the African millionaire, did in the following minutes was something that shut up everyone who mocked, something that made even those who never got emotional really cry. This story is for those who have already felt what it's like to be humiliated, for those who have already cried in secret because they didn't have anything to eat, for those who have heard that they will never amount to anything in life. So stay with me until the end, because what will happen from now on is one of those things that we only believe when we see it with our own eyes. This poor woman had lost count of how many days were like that one. She would wake up before sunrise, pack the few bananas she managed to get on credit from her neighbor at the market, and set off barefoot, facing the hot, rocky ground of the road. The journey to the spot where she usually stayed seemed to get longer and longer. The heat was suffocating, the air seemed to stop halfway, and the sun beat down mercilessly. But do you know what was worse? It wasn't the heat. It wasn't the hunger gnawing at her stomach. What really hurt the most was the indifference. People passed by her as if she were invisible, people in cars, on motorcycles, on bicycles, and even those who passed by on foot. No one looked her in the eye. Many pretended not to see her. Others even made a point of turning their faces away as if the mere fact of her being there was an inconvenience, and the saddest thing is that she had gotten used to it. She no longer expected a smile, a good morning, a gesture of kindness. She just wanted someone to stop and buy a banana or two. She didn't need much, just enough to buy some rice, and maybe, if there was any left over, some soap to wash her clothes that were so dirty they were no longer even colorless. There was one day in particular, one of those days when it seems like life makes a point of testing you to the limit, when she stood there for hours without selling anything, just the dust from the road sticking to her skin and her stomach making noises from being so empty. She remembered her last meal, a cup of water mixed with sugar, just to stave off hunger. But that day, it seemed like God had forgotten about her. And it was on that very day that a scene happened that she would never forget. A child, she must have been about 5 or 6 years old, ran down the road. Skinny, barefoot, with scraped knees and eyes full of tears. The child's mother, it seemed, had moved on, ignoring her requests for food. The girl stopped right in front of the vendor's makeshift stand, her eyes fixed on the bananas. Those little eyes shining with hunger were like a punch to her heart. And look, she might not have had much of anything, but she had a heart. That much. Without thinking twice, she picked up the ripest banana, the one that was almost overripe, and with a shy smile handed it to the girl. "Here, eat it. It's good for your growth," she said softly. The child took it as if it were a treasure, smiled brightly on her face, and ran back to where she had come from. Her heart sank, a mixture of happiness for having helped, and sadness for knowing that that banana could have been her only chance to make a sale that day. After that, she looked up to the sky, took a deep breath, and whispered as if speaking only for God to hear, "I know that you are watching. I know It was her only consolation, her only hope. Deep down, she still believed that doing good, even in pain, would bring some reward. Not that she expected anything great. She just wanted to survive. But destiny, oh destiny, was preparing an answer for her, one of those that we can never imagine. And the most curious thing is that it all started at that moment, in that small gesture of generosity. What she didn't know was that someone was watching. Yes, someone saw it. Someone
Never
she
have imagined.
but to calm down. I'll tell you about that part in a little while, because before that she still had more pain to face. Life still had a few more tests to throw at that woman, and what she went through in the following hours was heartbreaking, but at the same time, it was exactly what needed to happen, to change everything that would come after. And you know what? The most impressive thing is how a simple act of kindness can open doors that we never dreamed of. But wait, let me tell you what happened right after that, because the story was just beginning. You know that story that touches you deep inside, that makes your heart ache and your eyes fill with tears? Well, those who have come this far truly feel it like I do. Feel it like thousands of people who are here precisely for that, for stories that move you, that bring hope, and show that life can turn around in ways that no one expects. This is a space for those who value what is true, for those who believe that kindness returns, that love transforms, and that God never forgets those who sow goodness. So like this video, and be part of this community that cheers, cries, and dreams together. Come, click here to subscribe, and stay with us for the next stories that will still touch your heart. That day, which was already difficult enough, managed to get even worse. It seemed like the universe had woken up in a bad mood with her. She had been standing there for hours, with her shoulders burned by the sun, her hands dirty with dust, and her eyes tired from looking at the road so much in the hope of seeing a customer stop. After that moment with the child, where for a second she felt like she had done something good, came the blow. You know when life seems to make a point of reminding you that you are just another one in the crowd, invisible, easy to ignore? Well, that was exactly how she felt. When the truck stopped, her heart started beating faster. It had been a long time since any vehicle had stopped, and it was a big truck, the kind where the driver usually has a few bucks to spend, especially on road food. She quickly adjusted her headscarf, wiped her sweaty forehead with the hem of her clothes and tried to smile, even though her throat was dry from thirst and her stomach was empty. If there was one thing she knew, it was how to hide the pain with a smile. The driver got out of the truck with that arrogant manner, heavy steps, the look of someone who thought he ruled the world. He came straight up to her, looked at the bananas and asked disdainfully how much they cost. She answered quietly but politely, as she always did. She tried to hold on to hope that this time she would be able to sell at least one or two, but his answer was like a slap in the face. He took a banana from the basket, peeled it right there, took an exaggerated bite, as if he was trying to show that it was nothing to him. And when it was time to pay, the humiliation came. He raised his voice on purpose, speaking loudly so that everyone could hear. "Pay for this! Who is going to spend money on beggars' food? This should be free. Or better yet, you should be the one paying me for having the courage to touch this." And the worst was what came next. The people who were nearby, the same ones who passed by her every day, the ones who saw her with her sweaty face, worn clothes, dirty feet, started laughing. They laughed as if her embarrassment was a spectacle, as if that moment was free entertainment for everyone who wanted to forget their own problems by mocking someone else's pain. She stood there, still, with her face red, her eyes watering, but she didn't let the tears fall. Not there, not in front of them. She just lowered her head, took a deep breath and tried to hide the lump in her throat. Inside, her heart was screaming. It was a mixture of shame, anger, sadness and tiredness. A deep tiredness from a whole life of being treated like trash, a desire to disappear from there, to never have to face that kind of situation again. But she knew she couldn't leave. If she did, she wouldn't have anything to take home, and she had someone waiting for her, someone who depended on her. Because the truth is that people only saw the poor woman selling bananas, but no one had any idea of the battle she fought every day outside of there. And at that moment, do you know what came to her mind? The scene of the girl she had helped earlier, the hungry child, eating the banana as if it were the greatest gift in the world. That echoed in her mind as a kind of consolation, a reminder that despite everything, she could still do good. Even though life had hit her hard, she chose to continue with a clean heart. But the question that wouldn't leave her head was how long? How long would she put up with all of this? How long would she be humiliated without having the right to respond? And the most curious thing, what she had no idea, was that while all of this was happening, someone standing in a car a little further ahead was watching everything, every word, every cruel laugh, every held-back tear. That someone saw everything, heard every word of humiliation, and at that moment she made a decision. But that I'll tell you about in a moment, because what happened next was the beginning of a turning point that she would never forget. After that horrible scene with the truck driver, she tried to take a deep breath and carry on. She had no choice, you know. It was either that or go home empty-handed and face another night without food. But the worst part is that things didn't stop there. As if that episode had given everyone permission to start pouring out a bunch of prejudice that was stuck in their throats. One after the other started pointing fingers, making comments, laughing. A group of guys who were sitting in the shade of a nearby tree let out the first pearl of wisdom. That woman must not have showered in a week. She smells like a dead animal. Another, with a glass of soda in his hand, added with a mocking laugh, "That thing should be banned from being here. It's scaring away the customers." She listened to everything in silence. She pretended it wasn't her fault. But inside, wow, inside, it was as if each sentence was a stab in the back of her neck. And the saddest thing was that it wasn't anything new. She had heard this kind of thing before. She had seen people hold their noses when they passed her. She had felt looks of disgust, as if she were a threat, a walking disease. The difference was that day, it seemed like the entire city had decided to join forces against her. Even people she had never seen before. People who just drove by, looked from afar, and made faces as if she were to blame for being there trying to survive. The smell they complained about, she knew where it came from. It was the sweat accumulated from days of work. It was the dust from the road stuck to her skin. It was the clothes she washed with bucketfuls of water and left to dry in the wind because she had no soap, no fabric softener, and sometimes not even enough water. But who there knew that? Who there cared? No one wanted to know why she was there, or how many times she had cried in secret because she couldn't sell anything to buy food. No one knew how many nights she spent praying quietly, asking for just a chance to have a slightly better life. To them, she was just another dirty, ragged woman who blocked the view of the city. There was a moment when she thought about taking the bananas and leaving, getting out of there, disappearing. But then she looked at the floor, saw the coins she had collected in the corner of the torn towel where she left the fruit, and realized that with that, she wouldn't even be able to catch the bus back home. He took another deep breath. She discreetly wiped her tears with the back of her hand and remained there, firm, holding back the tears, because she knew that weakening at that moment wouldn't do any good. But while everyone was laughing, while the disgusted looks were coming from all sides, while she was struggling to keep her head up in the midst of so much humiliation, there on the other side of the road, someone was still standing inside that black car, watching everything, without saying a word, but with his eyes fixed on her, as if every detail of that scene, every tear she tried to hide, was being recorded in his memory. And what that man was thinking at that moment is something you can't even imagine. But calm down. It's not time to talk about that yet, because what she was going to face in the next few minutes was still going to test her heart in a way that not even she knew she could handle. While she tried to hide her pain and shame, adjusting the few bananas she still had, as if that were the only shred of dignity she had left, a strange noise caught the attention of those around her. The engine of a car, but it wasn't just any car. The roar was quieter, deeper, the kind that only those who really understand cars can recognize. Slowly, the black vehicle, with tinted windows and impeccable paintwork, pulled up very close to where she was. At that very moment, the curious people who had been laughing and mocking her before changed their posture. You know that strange silence where it seems like everyone is holding their breath at the same time. That's exactly what happened. Everyone stopped to stare. The car remained there, with the engine running for a few seconds, until suddenly the door opened. But what no one expected was the man who got out. He didn't have an expensive suit, a gold watch, or the kind of clothes that we immediately associate with someone who has money. Quite the opposite. He was dressed simply, in worn jeans, a basic t-shirt. Nothing that would draw attention. If you took a quick look, you might think he was just another ordinary worker, maybe a truck driver or some traveling salesman. But there was something about him, something in the way he walked, in his steady gaze, in the way he observed everything around him, that made it clear that this man was different. He crossed the street slowly with sure steps, as if he knew exactly what he was doing there. As he walked towards her, the whispers started, first quietly, then a little louder. One of the boys who had made fun of her minutes before said, "Oh, look, there, another one wanting free bananas. He must be her friend." And of course, the laughter started again. Only this time, the man who was approaching didn't seem the least bit concerned about what they were saying. He went straight to her. He stopped in front of the improvised stall, looked at the bananas, and then looked into her eyes. But it wasn't just any look. It wasn't the look of contempt that she was used to receiving. It wasn't a look of pity or disgust, and much less that sidelong look of someone who thinks they're doing her a favor just by talking to her. It was a look different, firm, direct, as if he saw something in her that no one else saw. As if at that moment, he wasn't just seeing a poor, dirty, humiliated woman. He was looking at the person, at the story, at the invisible struggle that she carried on her back. She was confused. For a few seconds, she even wondered if she knew that man from somewhere. She tried to remember, but no. She had no idea who he was. But there was something in that look that made her heart beat faster, a kind of curiosity mixed with fear. You know that feeling when something important is about to happen, but you don't know exactly what. He stood there, still, staring at her, while the people around him continued to whisper, laugh, and cast judgmental glances. And she, not knowing what to do, not knowing if she should say something or just wait, could only keep her gaze fixed on him too. Because deep down, something inside her told her that this moment was going to change everything. But what he did right after, and why exactly he had stopped there, that you will only know in the next part. Because believe me, what was to come, no one, not even her, could imagine. She was still trying to understand what was happening when he took that first step towards the tent. Her heart raced. It wasn't just because she was startled by someone standing there looking directly at her. It was the way he approached her, calmly, as if he had all the time in the world, as if she were the most important person in that place at that moment. And let's face it, it had been a long time since she had felt this important to someone. In the last few months, she had been just another tired face among so many others fighting for a bit of dignity on the side of the road. He stopped in front of her, looked at the bananas with almost exaggerated attention, as if he were evaluating the most. A precious gold in the world, And then, in a calm voice, without any arrogance, he asked how much one cost. She, half in disbelief that he really wanted to buy it, said the price almost in a whisper, afraid of yet another humiliation. After all, they had done this to her so many times that her body reacted automatically, ready to protect itself from the next blow. But instead of a mocking laugh or a mean comment, he just smiled, a slight smile, half from the corner of his mouth, as if to say, "I understand what you're going through." He took the money out of his pocket, a folded bill, and when he handed it to her, she realized he had given her triple the amount. She didn't know what to do. She reached out to give him the change, but he just shook his head and said, "You keep it. I know how hard it is to sell on the road like that." And look, that affected her in a way that few things had affected her lately, because it wasn't just about the money. It was about the way he spoke, the way he looked, the way he treated her like a person. But do you know what was even stranger? He didn't leave. He didn't take the banana and leave like the others did. He stayed there, standing, with the fruit in his hand, as if he was waiting for something. And then he started talking to her. He asked her name. He asked where she came from. He asked how she had started selling bananas. And the strangest thing, he asked in a tone of someone who really wanted to hear the answer. It wasn't the kind of question someone asks out of politeness, just to pass the time. He really wanted to know. At first, she answered a little embarrassed, not knowing how to act. After all, when was the last time someone was truly interested in her life? Not even she knew. But with time, the words started to come out. She said that she lived in a simple shack on the outskirts, that she had a small daughter, that her husband had left years ago, and that since then she had done everything she could to support her daughter alone. She told her about the nights without dinner, the days of scorching sun, the times she thought about giving up but couldn't because she had a child depending on her. He listened to everything in silence. He just nodded every now and then, as if each word she said was a stab in his chest too. And you know when you feel like someone is really listening, that was exactly it. She began to realize that, for the first time in a long time, there was someone in front of her who saw beyond the dirt on her clothes, beyond the dust on her feet, beyond the makeshift tent. And even without understanding the reason for so much interest, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: respect. But what she still had no idea is that that man, the one who was standing there with the banana in his hand and a steady gaze, had a much bigger reason for being there, a reason that she would only discover later when things started to change. In a way she never imagined possible, because what seemed to be just a conversation was, in fact, the beginning of something much bigger, something that, well, calm down. I'll tell you in a moment. As she tried to explain a little about the difficult life she led, with that lump in her throat of someone who is not used to being listened to, the people around her started to pay attention again. But it wasn't that kind of attention of someone who is interested in someone's story. It was that evil look, the same look she already knew well, the look of people who love to see other people suffering, as if it were cheap entertainment. One of the boys who had made fun of her a few minutes before was the first to open his mouth. With a mocking tone, almost shouting for everyone to hear, he said, "Do you think he's going to take you out of this life, do you? Look at him. He must be just another beggar like you." Everyone laughed. The group that had previously laughed only at her face, now laughed at her and the man who had stopped to buy the banana. They pointed, whispered, and made mean comments. She only attracts people of the same level. Look there, two miserable people talking. Now all she needs is for her to think she's getting a rich husband, right? Another added, "I'm sure he'll eat for free too and leave without paying like the others." Little did they know that the man had already paid 3 times as much for what he bought, and more than that, that his interest there was much greater than a simple banana. She tried to ignore it. She pretended she didn't hear, but it was hard, very hard. Inside, her heart felt like it was going to explode from so much shame. She looked at the floor, clasped her hands together, trying to hold back the tears, and for a moment she thought about apologizing to the man, asking him to leave before the situation got even worse. But before she could say anything, he did something she didn't expect. He stood there, firm, looking at her as if the laughter around her didn't exist, as if no one else there mattered, and it was at that moment, right at that moment, that something inside her began to change. You know, that spark of hope, that thought that says, maybe this time it will be different. Well, that was exactly what she felt. But what she didn't know yet was that his reaction, that firm look, was just the beginning. Because what that man was planning to do, no one there, not even remotely, could imagine. But calm down. I'll get to that part, because before that, she would still have to go through one more situation that truly seemed like the last straw. Something that would make her question everything, even her own faith. And the way it all happened, wow, you need to hear this. She was already completely shaken by everything that had happened. The humiliation of the driver, the laughter of the people, the cruel comments about her, and the man who had stopped to talk to her. It seemed like the universe had come together to test every last bit of strength she had inside her chest. Even so, she took a deep breath and tried to stay there a little longer. She thought, I'll hold on tight, just a few more hours. Who knows, maybe someone will stop and buy something. That's what she always did. She swallowed her tears, forced a smile, and moved on. But that day, it seemed like life wanted to make her give up once and for all. The sun was already beginning to set on the horizon, painting the sky with that orange hue that usually brings a bit of hope, you know. But for her, it seemed like a warning of another difficult night approaching. She was already collecting the remaining bananas when she heard a shout coming from behind. It was the owner of a small market nearby, a man everyone knew for his reputation as rude and ill-tempered. He came out of the market door, already shouting for everyone to hear, "Hey, you there, the bad! Smell isn't enough. Now you want to set up a point of sale at the door of my store. Do you think this is a market? Go away. You're driving away my rich customers." The scream was so loud that even those on the other side of the street turned to look. Once again, she became the target of everyone's gaze, as if she were a criminal, as if she were committing a great sin just by trying to sell some fruit so she wouldn't go home empty-handed. And the worst part was that she knew that man. How? Many times had she passed by there, asking him to put a box of bananas in the shade, just so they wouldn't spoil in the heat, and he always refused. Now, in front of everyone, he made a point of throwing her out as if she were a nuisance. She still tried to respond, to say that she was leaving, that she didn't want to bother anyone, but he wouldn't let her. He kept shouting, humiliating her, as if the louder he spoke, the more right he was. And of course, the people around him took advantage. To complete the spectacle, some people laughed, some people agreed. She even heard someone say, "Serves you right, stay there begging. That's what happens." Her heart couldn't take it anymore. The tears she had been holding back all day came all at once. But she didn't cry there in front of everyone. She grabbed the few bananas that were left, gathered them up with trembling hands, wrapped them in the old faded towel and walked away quickly, head down, trying to hide her face, as if she wanted to disappear. The way back home never seemed so long. Each step seemed heavier than the last. Tears fell, and she didn't even have the strength to wipe them away. She thought about her daughter, about hunger, about the tomorrow that would come without knowing what to do, and in the midst of this whirlwind of feelings, a question kept hammering in her head. Why? Why does life have to be like this for me? But what she didn't even imagine is that while she was driving home with her, heartbroken, The man in the black car, the one who stood there, standing still, watching everything, had already made a decision that, in a few hours, would turn her world upside down. But well, that's what I'm going to tell you in the next part, because believe me, what comes next is hair-raising. The next morning, her eyes were still swollen from crying so much. She had spent the entire night tossing and turning in that makeshift bed made of foam and torn blankets. It didn't take much effort to remember how humiliated she had been the day before. Every sentence, every laugh, every look of contempt, everything still echoed in her head as if it had just happened. And the worst part, even with all that pain, she was already getting ready to face another day on the road. She separated the bananas that were left, the ones that hadn't spoiled during the night, and was already tying the scarf around her head when she heard a strange noise coming from the street. It was the sound of an engine, but not a regular engine. It was one of those big moving trucks with the back loaded. She walked to the door with her heart racing, imagining that maybe it was just a neighbor getting new furniture or something. But when she opened the door, she froze. Right in front of her house, stopped, was the moving truck, and next to it, guess who was there? Getting out of a black car, now surrounded by 2 security guards in suits. Exactly him. The banana man. The same one who the day before had stopped on the road wearing simple clothes and a discreet smile. Now he was there, with the attitude of someone who is in charge, of someone who is respected, of someone who has power. She was speechless. For a few seconds she thought she was dreaming, or that she was confusing someone. But no, it was him. The way he walked was the same. His gaze, that firm, direct gaze, was also the same. Only now, the whole context was different. He was no longer dressed like a common worker. His clothes were branded, his watch was shining on his wrist, and the men around him seemed to be doing everything they could to make way for him. That was when her heart started beating even faster, and her head started spinning in a whirlwind of questions. Why was he there? What did he want with her? And most importantly, who was he really? The answer came next. He walked towards her, stopped right in front of the door, and with that same calm but firm tone of voice, said something she would never forget. Yesterday, I came to you as an ordinary man, because I wanted to see with my own eyes what no one here has the courage to see. I saw your struggle. I saw your kindness. I saw your dignity even in pain. And today, I come back here as who I really am. Before she could ask anything, he waved his hand. The men in the truck began to unload boxes and more boxes, new furniture, appliances, basic food baskets, and a thick envelope which one of the security guards handed directly into her hands. She opened it with trembling hands, and inside was a contract. A contract that named her as the official supplier of fruits and vegetables for no less than all the stores in the supermarket chain he ran. That's right. He wasn't just any client, he wasn't just a kind-hearted man. He was one of the most influential African millionaires in the region, owner of a chain that everyone knew, even those who had laughed at her on the road. She couldn't speak, she could only cry. Her legs were shaking. The ground seemed to disappear beneath her feet, because right there, at that moment, her life was starting to change in a way she never imagined. But do you know what was most impressive? There was still more to come, because what he did right after that, and how the whole city reacted, this, you'll have to wait to hear, because it was jaw-dropping. While she was still trying to understand what was happening, with her hands shaking as she held the contract and the envelope with the check, the man made sure to get everyone's attention. He turned to one of the security guards and said loudly, with that firm tone of someone who is used to giving orders, "Call everyone here. I want everyone who was watching her humiliation yesterday to be here now." It was as if time stopped for a few seconds. The neighbors who were already peeking through the windows began to leave their homes one by one, curious, whispering, wondering what was going on. The buzz grew louder, and soon that stretch of street became the center of attention in the neighborhood. Those who were there remembered very well what had happened the day before. The laughter, the cruel comments, the pointing of fingers, all of that was still fresh in everyone's memory. Only now, the mood was different. The same people who had made jokes now had red faces, some from embarrassment, others from pure fear of what might happen. The owner of the grocery store appeared at the door of the store, with that look on his face that made him not want to be there. He knew very well that his scream had been heard by half the entire neighborhood the day before. The truck driver, the same one who had mocked her and eaten the banana for free, also appeared there with his head down, walking slowly, as if he already knew he was going to have to hear some truths. Even the neighbors who laughed, the ones who made jokes, the ones who looked with contempt while she was being humiliated, were all there, with that look on their face that said, "Where am I going to hide my face now?" And it was right in front of them all, with that crowd watching, that the man held out the contract in her hands. He said loudly for everyone to hear, "This woman who you called stinky, trash beggar is now the official fruit supplier for my supermarket chain. And this is just the beginning." She could barely hold back the tears. Her hands were shaking. Her whole body seemed to not believe that this was really happening. But the moment of greatest impact was yet to come. He opened another envelope, took out a check, and without any suspense, handed it to her saying, "This here is for you to buy a new house, a real house, where you and your daughter will never again have to spend the nights afraid of rain coming through the roof." At that moment, the owner of the grocery store turned pale. He tried to approach her, tried to apologize, but his voice barely came out. He stuttered, stumbled over his words. The truck driver, with a blank stare, also tried to say something, but the most he could manage was a low apology, almost a whisper of shame. And the neighbors, those who laughed, began to lower their heads, not daring to look her in the eye. And what about her? She stood there, still, with tears in her eyes, holding tightly those papers that would change her life, because at that moment, she was no longer the woman who sold bananas on the side of the road. She was a winner, someone who, even in the midst of pain, humiliation and hunger, never stopped doing good. And justice, that justice that she so often thought would never come, had finally arrived. But what no one imagined is that the biggest surprise was yet to happen, because what he said right after, wow, that I need to tell you in the next part, because it was the kind of turnaround that made everyone there, even those who were just passing by, open their mouths. The days that followed that morning were like a dream she had never dared to dream before. You know that feeling when you wake up and for a few seconds think that everything was just your imagination, only to later remember that it was real? That was exactly how she felt. Her life, which until a few days before had seemed like an endless cycle of humiliation, hunger and invisibility, was now beginning to take a turn that she had never imagined would one day be possible. With the money from the check, the first thing she did was look for a real house. She didn't want anything fancy. She wanted a simple but safe place, with a roof that wouldn't let the rainwater in, with a room just for her daughter, with a kitchen where she could cook real food without having to worry about leaks or rats showing up in the middle of the night. When she received the keys to that simple but tidy little house, she cried. She cried, hugging her daughter. She cried with relief, with gratitude, with happiness, and also with fear. Fear that it would all end suddenly, because after living in struggle for so long, she still had that thought deep down. Is this for real? Do I really deserve all of this? But what happened next made it clear that yes, she deserved it. With the supplier contract in hand, she soon realized that she could no longer work alone. The volume of fruit she needed to deliver to supply all those supermarkets was much greater than she could carry on her back alone. That was when she made the decision that changed not only her life, but that of other women in the community as well. She went to the houses of her neighbors, those who also made a living from small jobs, selling what they could, cleaning yards or doing laundry, and made the invitation that none of them expected to hear. I want to put together a team, and I want you with me. I won't forget who has always been there. Let's work together. Let's grow together. At first, no one really believed it. They thought it was just talk, or that it wouldn't last. But when she showed the contract, when the first deliveries started happening, and when the transport truck started picking up the fruit right at her door, then everyone understood that it was real. She rented a small space, which became the company's first location. She set up makeshift shelves, bought new scales, hired people to help sort the fruit, pack it, organize the orders. And do you know what's best? She made sure to hire only women from the community, women who, like her, had also faced humiliation, rejection, who knew what it was like to wake up not knowing what they were going to feed their children. Every week the business grew a little more. Her name began to circulate around the city. People who had previously pretended she didn't exist now walked past her company and whispered, "It's her, the one from the side of the road, the one who became a businesswoman." And do you know what she did when she heard that kind of comment? She smiled, but it wasn't a smile of revenge. It was a smile of someone who knows that good things, sooner or later, always come back. And it was there, in the middle of that new beginning, that she realized that her life had taken a turn that only God could have planned. Because it wasn't just a turnaround in terms of money, it was a turnaround in terms of dignity, of looking in the mirror and recognizing herself as someone who had overcome, as someone who had gone through pain, but had not let the pain define who she was. But do you know what's most incredible? The story isn't over yet, because what the African millionaire did next, and the invitation he made to her, oh, that I'll tell you in the next part. Because what comes next is one of those things that we only see in movies or in the stories we tell here, for those who believe that miracles still happen, and looking back at everything that happened, from that first day on the side of the road, with the sun burning her skin, through the humiliations, the hidden tears, the hunger, the shame, until that moment when she held in her hands a contract, the key to a new house, and the beginning of a company. The truth was one. God saw it all. He saw every tear shed in the silence of the early morning. He saw every prayer whispered with her face buried in the pillow so no one could hear. He saw every time she chose to do good, even when she had nothing to give. Every time she was humiliated, ignored, judged. God was there, watching. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't luck. It was an answer. It was a promise being fulfilled. Because deep down, her life has always been living proof that humility, kindness, and a clean heart may even go unnoticed by human eyes, but they never go unnoticed in the eyes of God. He saw her when she shared the last banana with the hungry child. He saw her when she held back her tears so as not to break down in front of others. He saw her when she chose to forgive instead of harboring hatred for those who treated her badly. And at the right time, when she least expected it, justice came, not in the way she imagined, but in the way that only God knows how to do, with abundance, with dignity, with a turnaround. And that's why today, when someone asks her what she learned from all this, she answers with a firm gaze, a voice full of truth, and a heart overflowing with gratitude. Never underestimate a humble person, because it is precisely in them that God plants the greatest miracles. I know that those who have come this far have felt every detail of this story, just as I felt while I was telling it. And look, that's exactly why this video exists, to touch you deeply, to remind you that things can change, that justice comes, and that God always has a bigger plan. Maybe in some way this story has brought you hope, or even served as that little push you needed to believe a little more that better days are coming. And you know what's amazing? Now you can make more people feel this way too. Every like you give, every subscription you make to the channel, makes YouTube show this story to more people who at this very moment need to hear a message like this. It's a chain of goodness, simple, fast, and powerful. And of course, I really want to hear from you too. Comment below with the word miracle, just so I know that you really felt the impact of this story. And hey, tell me, do you want the sequel? Do you want to know what happened next? What the African millionaire did for her? Then write to me too. Part 2. There in the comments. Because if enough people ask, I'll bring it quickly. Now, seriously, before you leave, check out the next video that's appearing on the screen. The story that's coming up there is even more chilling. A twist that no one expected, with a twist that still leaves people in the comments saying, I cried watching this. Click there, and let's continue feeling everything together, because what's coming is even stronger.